Hey, what's going on, everybody? Special guest here. It's Travis May with A to Z Sports and also Total College Football News. Was at the Senior Bowl practices. We're going to talk about some Miami Hurricanes. Four guys that were there. Travis, let's start with Xavier Restrepo. Coming off a big senior season, 69 catches, over 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns. School's all-time leader in receiving yards and receptions. What'd you make of him? And how did he look? We saw some of the clips, and I urge everybody to check out Travis's work. But just what'd you make of Xavier this week?
He looked great, and especially in one-on-ones. But I felt like he was just always in the right place, at the right time, working the right leverage, even in sevens and elevens. He's just such a smart, savvy player. It's clear he's just really experienced, and there's no wonder he was so productive in his final season. Just because he's a smart player, beyond being the athlete that he is, and beyond being able to make the incredible catches on the sideline, get both feet in, proving he's kind of pro ready already. It's just there's just layers to his game, and so that showed up throughout the entire week.
Just one-on-ones in particular, just how do you think you looked in those settings against those type of corners and defensive backs?
Yeah, the Senior Bowl is great because you get back to back to back reps facing off against different body types at every position, right? I mean, like if you're a long corner, you get stuck against the smaller, shifty wide receiver, and good luck, and vice versa. Even against the more physical guys, I felt like Restrepo was able to break free, and not just on one particular kind of route. It was the short, easy stuff like the slants and the crossers, but the double moves and the comebacks and the vertical, I felt like he was really good in stacking situations where I didn't always see him do that when he was with Miami. So I feel like he's already been clearly working on some things to round out his full skill set to say, hey, I belong in day two draft conversations, and early at that.
Sure, and Xavier checks in at 5'9", 200 right there. And you touched on maybe his draft prospect at this point in time. What do you think he has to continue to improve, to prove to scouts and to show that he, as you mentioned, as he belongs? And I know a guy like Xavier covering him throughout his career at Miami. Remember him from high school. He's always felt like he's got a lot to prove no matter what he does. And I remember earlier this season, Miami offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson mentioned, look, wherever he gets drafted, wherever team he lands, he's just going to be one of those guys that's going to be consistent, practices, kind of continue to make plays. That's going to be kind of what he's going to do. That's what he did at Miami. What do you think he has to show, continue to show, have a high draft status with his size that he's at?
Yeah, I think a lot of guys who are his height, they're a little bit leaner than he is. And he doesn't really play or look like he's 5'9", 200 plus, like, because that's almost like a running back, Bill. But he doesn't necessarily look like that. But I think it's good that he does weigh a little bit more than your typical, maybe a slot to Z projection to the NFL. So I think he needs to prove that he has the versatility to play all three positions, but be willing to win and slot scenarios, because I think that as a versatile Z kind of moving wide receiver or kind of slot, he could succeed. But if he's going to be a slot, he needs to prove that he's got that athleticism to be, the guy that can burn and get to the sideline quickly and match up against whoever, however. So I don't care a ton about the NFL Combine in terms of like, oh my gosh, this guy ran a 4.3 flat. It's really just a mix of different threshold tests. And for me, he just needs to break some key thresholds that say, hey, there's no athletic liabilities on his profile that would, deter teams from selecting him in the early third round, which is, where profiles like his typically go.
And this is a great game, great bowl game for Miami fans. All four of these guys with Damien Martinez, Elijah Arroyo, and Jalen Rivers all on the national team. So you can have
Yeah.
a chance to watch all these guys kind of watch that game. With Damien Martinez, we saw him have that big game to end his Miami career there, cracks the 1,000-yard mark, the 10
Yeah.
touchdowns, and really came on second half of the year with his production compared to what he was doing before he arrived at Miami. What'd you make of him in practices? What kind of stood out to with him checking in at 5'11", 226?
Yeah, there were, I guess, among the agent circles, I was actually talking to one of our other A to Z guys about him potentially coming in, being closer to like 240 or something like that. And I was like, man, I don't know if that would actually be good weight for Martinez. So I'm fine. I mean, if you're playing sub 230, that probably means you're in the sweet spot where you can have that burst and have that long speed. Because even dating back to when he was a recruit, he would flash some long speed. It was more build up than, first three steps, burn by you kind of speed. But we saw some of that this week. And so he wasn't, and the run game in general at the Senior Bowl is a little bit hard to gauge because they don't really tackle, like they'll wrap the arms and they'll bullet the play dead, but it's not a normal situation until the actual game on the weekend. And then it's even kind of more strange because, you only have like a quarter if you're lucky to play. But he did really well. There were a few runs the second day I was really impressed by. One today that he had to make a couple different cuts, and that stood out to me. But I think he's right in that sweet spot. If he's over 230, I think he loses some of that burst. But if he is in that 220 plus range, there is hope that he can actually really impress the combine too. Because like I said, he has that long speed. He's demonstrated that before. And if he does get in that 4.5 range at 225 plus pounds, teams are going to like that speed ratio, like that speed rating, that speed score, for sure from Damien Martinez.
And where do you kind of see him? I know you touched on Restrepo a little bit, but again, at this point in the process, coming off the season he had, the career he had, highly productive.
Yeah.
Also, just kind of where do you kind of fit him in with the other backs in this draft class?
Yeah, I think he fits around same spot that another Damien went, I think 2 years ago, who actually did really well at the Senior Bowl process, Damien Pierce. I think he ended up being an early fourth round guy, and I think that's probably where we see Damien Martinez go. Typically, historically, in the last 10 years or so, we've seen, less first round, even second round investment at the position, but you still see kind of a cluster go in that, pick 60 to 90 range, and you'll get 6 to 8 running backs that squeak into the first 3 rounds, even though a few years in a row they only saw 3 go combined in the first and second rounds. So it's hard to get in the first and second round. You got to be a pretty special talent. And while I think he is good, this class and the Senior Bowl proved this is rather deep at the running back position. So there's a lot. There's a big chunk of running backs I could see going in between really pick 70 and 130, and I think he would be closer to the 130 range, but inside round 4.
Sure. Elijah Arroyo, again, just watching some of the clips, certainly looked like he impressed and did well. And no surprise, we've been waiting on Elijah, be healthy completely, and we saw what he could do this year. The 35 catches, 590 yards, the 7 touchdowns. Again, Miami had the top offense in the country, and Elijah was a big part of it. His production compared to where they were in the past with the tight end production. What would you notice with Elijah and his playmaking ability?
Yeah, I mean, finally healthy, right? I remember, I don't know how many camps in a row I felt like it was like, man, Arroyo is going to be so good this year, and then it just couldn't ever put it all together. But I think Cam Ward was a huge part of that, and I'll get to that. But from day one, from like route one, he was just dunking on kids and just stomping on these defensive backs. And I think it was his second rep. He was facing off against this Illinois State player, which good on him for making it to the Senior Bowl, but he did not belong trying to cover Elijah Arroyo. So he was just kind of embarrassing whoever he faced off against. It didn't matter. He was going to find a way to stack with his physicality, finish off with his speed and his hands. And he was so close on a couple longer plays that would have just solidified him as the winner of the entire week had he just pulled in a couple more on day one. He did have a couple deeper, kind of like, I guess you could call them more corner routes that he actually did convert, but you couldn't catch them all. One play in particular was deep down the sideline, just the defensive back just barely got like a finger in there to stop it. But he really impressed today on the third day of practice in the red zone drills, and no surprise, being 6'4" plus 250 pounds, and being having enough agility, flexibility, and speed and strength. It just wasn't fair today, and so he had a handful of highlights again, to the surprise of no one.
Sure. Speaking of highlights, I mean, what'd you make of him punting the ball after on the celebration there? It was surprising when I saw
got
it.
that. Oh.
Yeah, I saw that. It was great. And to me, he's kind of more of the humble, to me, covering him, he's been on the more humble side. That showed a little bit of a different side of him. What'd you make of that? And what was kind of the reaction when he did that?
I mean, yeah, people were just laughing around us all just because they were. You don't expect him to just. He didn't. I don't think he meant to kick it literally out of the stadium, but but it was still funny to see because you're right. He wasn't that type of personality necessarily. Anytime that we had opportunities to interview him this week, but when I did speak to him on Wednesday during the kind of open media portion in the ballroom there at the convention center, talked to him a little bit about Cam Ward, and I think Ward was really, really instrumental in helping him grow into the leader that he was, because Cam was really instrumental in bringing the skill position players together to grind film and work together as a unit. And he talked about getting texts from Cam Ward like, "Hey man, you want to catch some targets this week or no?" And so Arroyo would come and be a part of that process, and I think that just reminded him that he had a role as a leader. Even though he didn't have all the experience of being healthy in seasons prior to produce, he was a leader. And so I think he stepped up and grew into that player. And the way that he talked in interviews, you can tell he's just really grown. He's prepared for this, and he's ready to be one of the top tight ends in the class.
And this is great you're doing this, Travis, but urge everybody again, A to Z Sports, check out Travis, more work there, total college football news. Jalen Rivers, 6'5", 337. He was a guy that we saw play a lot of left tackle. We've seen him at guard at Miami. He's always felt like he practiced at center. He feels like he wants to be a versatile lineman. Did you see any of that at practice? And what were your thoughts of Jalen, how he's doing?
I did. He was hanging around Wyatt Milam, another of West Virginia, another favorite prospect of mine. They were joking around with each other during the media portions, like making sure that each other got interviews and like taking video of each other while the other person was getting interviewed by someone, just trying to make the other person laugh, which was always great. So he's got some fun personality to him, but the coaching staff on both teams were really pressing all the guys, because this particular class has a couple, truly typical high end tackles, and then a bunch of guys that it's like, okay, they could be a tackle, but they could probably also shift inside. And Rivers fits that mold, like a lot of the guys in this class. And so I think he's going to have a tough time getting early round capital, just because there are a lot of profiles in this class that look like him. But I didn't see him have any major issues when I did watch him. He didn't have any of the truly embarrassing reps, the power rushing reps where he just got thrown to the ground, like we saw Mike Green do, Shamar Stewart do a couple times here. So if you're holding your own at the Senior Bowl, you're good enough to be drafted. I think he's a safe day 3 projection, but I was impressed, and I think he had a really strong balance of personality with the professionalism as well.
And you gave a great story, just another example of Cam Ward, and a long list of examples. Obviously, currently we're hearing a lot of top pick possibilities or projections to him to be in the number 1 pick there.
Yeah.
Just your overall thoughts on Cam, and obviously he's not there, but just your thoughts on just your impressions of Cam and possibly being that top quarterback, top player in the draft.
I think you're probably really familiar with his story at this point, but I think he's just, first and foremost, he's a fun guy to root for, because he goes from this program in high school that they don't even hardly throw the ball, so he doesn't get offers at all. Has to go the FCS route, and he has to press and push, and just to start there, and then he really impresses at Incarnate Word, transfers up to Wazoo, and there's nothing around him in terms of talent to really help him succeed. So he struggles with pressure at times, struggles with some turnovers at times, but still puts up some decent numbers, shows those flashes that we see, or really saw at Miami even more so this past year, to give us an idea of, hey, this guy actually could be a draft pick, and a high draft pick one day. And he was really getting buzz like that. Even the season where he transitioned from Incarnate Word to Washington State. But once he got that deal at Miami to go there, it was like, okay, this guy might be legit. And then for him to put up the numbers that he did this past year, it was just basically him, Jackson Dart, and a couple other guys who checked every key efficiency marker that you want to see in terms of projecting success to the NFL for the data nerds like myself. But then he also has the physical traits that really wow. He's got the arm strength. He can roll out left and chuck it in the end zone to Xavier Restrepo, and like he did in the Florida, or maybe it was George in the Florida game. But yeah, so he's got the requisite mobility. He's got the arm strength he can improvise. Does the improvisation get him in trouble sometimes? Yes, it does. But at the same time, I think he has enough of the upside you want to see that you just go, okay, in this class with these quarterbacks, he's probably going to be the first overall pick.
Great stuff, Travis. I know you're busy. Your time is valuable. I appreciate you taking some time to break this down. And there's a lot of Miami fans, a lot of NFL draft fans that are curious about these prospects. So thank you for your time, and enjoy it.
Yeah, man, glad to join you and anytime. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Carson Beck. You guys just keep on replacing the quarterbacks, just seeing if you can repeat, get back to it. I wish you guys best of luck.
I know a lot of fans are excited about Carson, and maybe we'll be doing this again next year at this time. So appreciate
Yeah,
it, man.
have a good one.